Yeah. Hi.
Maybe there is a wide disparity between wow. Everybody's answering is like
Oh, really? Are you not writing over?
No, I'm not doing the story on it.
Ah, I didn't realize there would be a story on this. So.
Well, there should be. There should be.
Okay. Hopefully it won't be that controversial. For sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, like loud log.
They,
It sounded serious. Hi, everyone.
yeah, but that was a good idea.
My name is Suzanne Majors Davis. May I have your attention for a moment, please? I'm close. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Majors Davis, and I'm honored to be here tonight to moderate this Rollingwood candidates debate, or forum, no debate. So I'm your neighbor in Westlake, and I've covered Rollingwood in our area for the Westlake Picayune and the Austin American Statesman for 6 years. Tonight, we'll hear from 6 candidates with the courage to run for 3 seats on the Rollingwood City Council. As someone who has covered many public meetings, I am always amazed and gratified when citizens are willing to offer themselves up for service without regard to the sacrifices it requires or the promise of gratitude. So let us commend these candidates for their willingness to serve you. We'll begin by giving each person 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Then they'll take turns answering 7 prepared questions. Then we'll offer you, our audience, a chance to briefly question our candidates before we conclude. After that, candidates will have up to 2 minutes for closing statements to tell you why they're most qualified. We'll begin with Chris Braden, then continue on, and we'll alternate. The next question will go to Alec.
So we're doing opening statements first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, my name is Chris Braden. I'm at 1002 Ewing Circle. I feel like I've done some prep already and answered a bunch of these questions already. Ryan was kind enough to send out a questionnaire. Maybe some of you have gotten already in terms of our responses. I'm excited to be here today. I'm excited to see, mainly more than anything, and to your point, Suzanne, I'm excited there's so many people running for a seat on this city's council. I hope that, and one of my hopes is that we have just a plethora and a whole bunch of folks try to fill a lot of the seats that exist on the boards and commissions underneath the council, because I think for a city of our size, a small one at that, we've got to have a ton of community involvement, or else this thing's not going to work. And so with that in mind, obviously I think that I'm qualified and excited to talk about some of the things that the issues that might be in front of the city. And I think throughout the rest of the evening here, with some of those questions in mind, that you'll get a good sense of where at least I stand on some things. But more than anything, I feel really grateful to be up here this evening. Enough people kind of pushing me to do this and say, we think you'd be qualified and appropriate for the job. And that feels good personally. So with that, I'll probably yield the floor to the other candidates. But excited about this evening and excited about having the opportunity to speak in front of all y'all.
Thank you. Alec?
Thank you for being here and giving me this opportunity to share my ideas. My name is Alec Robinson, and I've lived in Rollingwood for over a decade with my wife and 2 daughters. We love this city, not only because of the great location and the great schools, but also because Rollingwood is a small municipality where citizens can have a strong impact on how things are run, and that's very important to us. I'm seeking your vote for a seat on Rollingwood City Council because I believe my skills and experience can help the city going forward at this time. I've demonstrated my ability and willingness to engage the community on major issues that affect them. I've knocked on doors to meet our residents, to listen to their concerns. I've had success encouraging citizens to attend and participate in council meetings. We need this level of involvement from our citizens going forward, and I can help with that. I have extensive experience and skills in product development, operations, and financial modeling. As an engineer, I've spent a lot of time in R&D managing development of new products, finding cost-effective solutions, and delivering results on time and on budget. I can apply these skills to help manage some of our needs on water and infrastructure. I also have experience in investment banking and would be more than comfortable helping figure out our creative options for how we might pay for these potential projects in the future should the community decide to pursue them. I'm a listener by nature. If you elect me to the City Council, I will study facts and figures, listen and take to heart input from the community before casting a vote on any important subject. I'd be honored to serve our community in this capacity.
Great, thanks. Hi, my name is Amy Patillo, and an easy way to remember how to say my last name, because it has 2 L's and is often mispronounced, is Patillo like armadillo. Though you will hear some of my close friends in the neighborhood who will say Patillo, and I answer to either one. So I see many new neighbors here, and also a lot of faces that I've known now for many years. My husband and I moved to Rollingwood in 2004, and we bought when the Garwood's first home in Rollingwood. Duke Garwood is a wonderful architect who's built multiple homes, and we were honored to purchase his personal home that he had lived in for 20 years already, raising his family. And we are now raising our son in that same home. He is a 5th grader. I jumped into council service in 2013 and served on the city council from 2013 to 2015. I took a deliberate break from the council and served on the Parks Commission for several years. And then in 2018, there was an opening that needed to be appointed on the council. And so I was appointed back to the council and then started serving a 2-year term after that. And my 2-year term is one that's coming up. And so I am up here hoping to be reelected along with other residents. And I am thrilled to see a full panel of people. It has been a while since we have had a contested election in Rollingwood, and I think that we're stronger when we take the opportunity to have conversations like this. And I also echo, if you haven't seen Ryan Clinton's back there with the black mask on, if you haven't seen his survey, he can get you the answers that all of us gave to a lot of specific questions. And I appreciated the opportunity to do that, and I think it's a really helpful guide along with tonight's forum. My focus on the council, is that my time?
Yeah,
Okay.
You'll get more time.
Oh, great, thank you. I look forward to more.
Emily?
Hi everyone, Emily Doran here. I want to thank my fellow candidates, the Rollingwood community that's here in person as well as virtual, and Mrs. Davis, thank you so much. So a little bit about myself. I'm a working mom of 2 beautiful daughters. One is here, one is 3 and a half, and she would tear the place apart, so she's at home. I have a dedicated career in higher education fundraising, and previously before that, I was a journalist here in Austin. I'm a dedicated volunteer at the Austin Junior League, also with Eanes Elementary through the Eanes Education Foundation, and also within this community on RCDC. I have a passion for dedication, and I believe as a volunteer, you must dedicate your time, talent, and your treasures to your communities. And I'm here today, and I decided to run in this race because I believe that we need a better representation of the community now and in the next 20 to 30 years on the Rollingwood City Council. And I do not believe that young family voices are adequately represented, and we need a seat within city government because I believe if all voices are heard, then together we can make decisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. My name is Brooke Brown. I've been a resident of Rollingwood since 1980. I've served previously as a volunteer municipal judge for 3 years, and then more recently as a member of the Comprehensive Plan Strike Force and the Board of Adjustment. And I chaired the Tax and Bond Subcommittee for the Comprehensive Plan Strike Force. I want to thank everyone who's come tonight and those who are watching online for participating in this discussion. I want to thank my colleagues for standing for election. It's not an easy job, and I think you should be commended, and we all should be commended for accepting the opportunity to take on this responsibility. I am asking for your vote because I believe I have relevant experience and commitment to resolve these issues that concern our community. We have issues in connection with our water system, with our stormwater drainage system, and in finding funds that can support a renovation of our city hall. And we also need to address transparency in our governmental processes. That came from our Strike Force survey, and I believe it is perhaps the most essential issue, or at least the first issue we must address. I have spent a career representing utility clients, and while that may sound very boring, it was an exciting career for me. Utility clients have long-term capital needs. Those needs must be financed. Thank you. I'm sorry, was my time up?
Yes, 10 seconds up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's 10. Okay, we got it.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
You'll get another chance.
Okay, thanks.
Phil?
Hi. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for coming here tonight and those participating virtually. My name is Phil Mcduffie. I've been a Rollingwood resident for 17 years. Many of you have received a letter and email explaining why I'm running. Tonight, I'd like to give you a brief summary of why I think I'm qualified to be one of your city council members. My background is mainly as a computer programmer. After graduating undergrad, I worked for Parsons International. That's a consultant engineering firm which mainly does civil, environmental, and Department of Defense work. I did a variety of financial applications for them and also did a lot of modeling of different infrastructure for both nations and municipalities. After that, I moved to Boston and took a job with the division of Chase Manhattan Bank, and I was one of the 30 programmers that wrote the software that moved the majority of money around the world for a long time. While I was doing that, I was pursuing my master's in business administration at night. Once I got my master's, I was tired of shoveling snow and high taxes, and when I was offered a consulting job in Austin, Texas, I took it. I came down here, I was a consultant for TxDOT, for the comptroller, for the Texas Education Agency. After that, I worked in wind power development, which is another large infrastructure. Mainly did a lot of wind modeling, and also ended up negotiating both tax abatements and land leases. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Alec, we'll begin with you and ask, what would your priority be if elected?
So one of my first priorities would be to work on ways to communicate information with the city more effectively. I think that some of the issues that we've had recently have just popped up just because we've had term sheets that appear before the community's even had an opportunity to discuss things. So I would work on trying to improve the way we communicate, either through more emails, mailings, maybe reorganizing the website a little bit to bubble up information. But one of the other things that we could do on the communication front is do a better job with the agenda item descriptions, and also when an agenda item is posted to a council meeting, perhaps having a little blurb, maybe one paragraph description of what that agenda item means. Because a lot of times unless you're following these meetings regularly, it's hard to like jump in and understand what a particular topic is. So those are some of the things that I would work on. And then in terms of like needs for infrastructure, one of the first things I would work on is the water situation, and do a deeper dive on what's causing some of those issues, and what it will cost to fix some of those, and how we can go about financing and getting those issues resolved for our citizens. So, thanks.
Thank you. Amy?
Great. So I currently serve as the Utility Commission Liaison, and we have a couple of infrastructure issues that we're working on. And so my priority right now, if reelected, is I would hope to continue to be in that role. We're looking at, the Utility Commission is about to take up the water system issue. I've been proposing ways to address the water system issue on Vance and Vale now for the last 6 months, and there's little steps that are being moved forward. And I think that one of the things that this election has done is really helped elevate that issue in our community, and hopefully we'll be willing to support it as a community of making sure that we fund that improvement. We're also looking at cell infrastructure options right now, which I think are really important, and making sure that we shore up our situation with Austin Energy before the next round of major storms comes, so that we have trees trimmed and we have emergency protocols in place.
Thank you. Emily? So with my background and experience in communication, I really would want to implement a strategic communication plan for the city. I think the city's done a great job we've lived here 4 or 5 years, owned since 2013, and as the years have gone by, more and more communication has happened, but I think we need a true strategic plan that can be outlined. And everything from some of the things that Alec talked about, but really it's thoughtful in outreach. It's also engagement from the community. I've talked a little bit about maybe finding call them forums before actual topics hit agenda items, so we can actually talk through these things. I learned that very much my service on RCDC, which the next thing I would really want to focus on is the commercial corridor. We have a tremendous opportunity there to bring in some great local companies, businesses, restaurants that I know we all love and desire and want, and that could also really lead to helping the infrastructure needs and paying for those things, which is also definitely goes hand in hand with that focus. So that's what I would focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. My priorities, if elected, would be first to work on issues regarding transparency in our governmental processes. That concern arose in the comprehensive survey. I've done a lot of work in that area in building consensus within industry groups between my utility clients and customers, and getting the kinds of consensus that's necessary to move a long-term capital project forward. We can do that here, I believe. We need a plan for dealing with our water system problems. We need a plan for dealing with our stormwater drainage problems. We need a plan for renovating City Hall. And I think the first step in those plans is to look again at what's been proposed, to engage the community in workshops to address the specifics of those plans, and then to seek consensus on how we fund that. And when I mean consensus, I mean what kind of budget can our community accept? What kind of budget will result in completion of those projects within an acceptable time period? And also, we need to do the work to vet the costs that have been identified in those plans and ensure that we're spending your money wisely. Thank you.
Well, first off, I have nothing to disagree with all the excellent responses that have been given so far. I too will like to start building more community and coalition. And I do believe that a deeper understanding of the boots on the ground issues that we face in regards to our infrastructure, what it's going to cost to fix and implement those things, is much needed in order to get community buy-in on any kind of funding, be that a voted bond or any other ways. So I would really like us to have these community workshops, as stated by so many of our other candidates. In addition to that, I would, if possible, like to extend the time periods and make it more clear exactly what is on agendas so that people may study those more thoroughly prior to the meetings, and attend the meetings that particularly address needs and issues that they might have or things that might impact them. The water infrastructure is the major issue that I heard when I went knocking on doors. People were consistently saying, how do we stop these boil water notices? So that would be a major thing that I would first focus on, trying to figure out what do we need to do, vetting some of the engineer studies, getting prices, and starting to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, Suzanne going 6 isn't a good deal on this one.
Yeah.
I think all the folks have covered it pretty well. I coached college basketball for about 10 years, so I've been in a lot of rooms.
Yes.
And what head coaches don't like to hear, redundancy of opinions. I think that all the things mentioned are important. I'm probably going to be a little bit more shaded towards the less sexy things like infrastructure. I'm not from here, in the Austin area. I'm kind of from a place that's, not quite as fancy in some ways. So, the things that are nice to have problems, they're going to be a little less high on my priority list. Water, drainage, all those things are really important. The things that really the city is responsible for making happen, that hopefully all of y'all as residents just kind of take for granted that it works. You've got folks buying, $7-8 million homes now, and the last thing that people expect to, when they've got a $7-8 million home, is to have an indoor camp out boiling water, for a couple of days. It's just not on the expectation list. So I think all those kind of non-sexy things are important. Obviously, and make that a priority. Priorities are interesting too. I mean, what defines a priority sometimes is not just the need, but also like what can get done. There might be some things that aren't super high on the list, right? But we can get it done, and if we can execute and get those things accomplished, then we might as well go do those things right away. So a priority is an interesting term in that way. There may be some things that are, not infrastructure related that we go, hey, we can execute, we can get that accomplished. That's a desire within the community. If that's the case, let's do it. But I think that if you spend too much or turn too much of your attention to those things, you end up just pushing down the line the most important things, which are, those infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Amy, we'll begin with you on this question. How would you maintain Rollingwood's quality of life and protect the small town feel of the community?
Well, I think that's a question that's on everyone's mind right now, given that we've just had a big community discussion about what would it look like if we added food service to our park. And one of the big topics that came up with that is the concerns that we continue to have as a community about how our residential streets are being used. So I think that continuing to advocate, as I have done frequently in this seat, that our curbs are not for sale when there's Zilker Park plans that might remove parking from Zilker Park and start pushing parking into our residential area. I think we have to be really aware of what's happening around us that might cause more traffic in our city, as well as looking at what we're doing within our city that might draw more traffic. And then really focus on improvements that we can make that incentivize people to use Bee Caves Road as the place that they're going through, so that they're stopping at our businesses and we really maintain that residential feel of our streets. Thanks.
Thank you. Emily?
So, I think, the reason why my husband and I moved here, which is probably will resonate with a lot of you, is the small town feel of Rollingwood next to kind of the big city, and you have access to all of those things. And it's interesting as you sit here and you watch how much around us is changing, and there's this mantra of that we don't want to change. And I think we've got to start thinking a bit more progressively about change in the way that we want it to be done, and having that control over how that change happens. I believe very strongly that lies in the commercial corridor, and creating opportunity where businesses want to come and be a part of our city, and they see the wonderful things here, and that money stays within the city of Rollingwood. There's been many studies done on people outside of the city that are coming into our city, and most of those people come and use all the city services that we probably take for granted, but enjoy, and they leave nothing behind but trash. Maybe they've run over a curb or left a mess. And so what we really want to think about is when people coming to our community, how can we benefit from that, and being really thoughtful about that. And I think the piece of it, I love seeing the audience, but I think the really important piece is that there's a group that's sometimes missing from this conversation, and that we make sure that we are including all the voices. And because if we don't include all the voices, then we are truly missing out on the opportunity of having that open communication that we all want and desire. And sometimes the loudest voices overshadow what is really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Brooke?
Thank you.
And let me know if you need me to ever repeat a question.
When the strike force was formed about a year ago, the quality of life issue was really at the center of the work of that committee. We were charged with developing a plan that might be used over the course of the next 10 years or more to maintain what this community saw as the values that were important. Those values include single-family residences, good streets, good walkability, good parks. And so when you look at the comprehensive plan, you can see that there are several different ways of addressing those needs. We looked first at development of the commercial corridor. That led to a need to compromise the development, the ability of commercial enterprises to use those lots, along with protection of the adjoining community. Most of our commercial corridor adjoins residential areas. And so you'll see a lot of work done in compromising not compromising the values, but coming up with a plan that respects the values of both our residences and gives ability to attract the kind of commercial businesses we want to attract to the corridor. And then the other thing I think is we need to work harder because we've had some divisive issues on how we communicate with one another in the sense of developing better ways to get community input before a plan is brought before the council for decision. And I have some very specific ideas about how we might do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil? Oh, just in time.
Time's up. The strike force has done an excellent job of looking at what the community has said are their most important beliefs and basically what do they want Rollingwood to look like. Through that, they have had a measured and compromised approach on redevelopment of our commercial corridor while still protecting the the residents that were abutting it. That should continue. One of the things that also I believe I've heard is people being concerned about the cut-through traffic and the speeding of the cut-through traffic. A long time ago, it was very well known when I first moved here that you simply did not speed through Rollingwood. It just wasn't done. You were going to get a ticket. That has temporarily been limited because of COVID. I talked to Chief Brady, and they're trying to limit exposure and pulling cars over during that time. I think once we get past the pandemic, we'll begin to do that again, and hopefully that will do two things. It will certainly decrease the speeding and the danger that incurs to our citizenry, and it'll probably be a gentle push to get people back out on Bee Caves Road and quit cutting through on Rollingwood Drive and that type of thing. In addition to that, I think small town feel, we need to work diligently to try to protect our tree canopy. That's something that everybody moved here because of. We have larger lots, we have a lot of heritage trees, and we'd like to protect those. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Chris?
Suzanne, can you repeat the question for me, just to make sure I don't miss it?
Happy to. How would you maintain Rollingwood's quality of life and protect the small-town feel of the community?
Well, then I'd touch on some of the things that have already been talked about. In fact, Amy brings up the fact that we're basically in the city. We just happen to be right adjacent to it. And there's some real issues associated with abutting a humongous downtown area. And those are some excellent points you brought up. Brooke also brings up some points about the commercial corridor that I think are critical. You've got some really challenging lot sizes over there that make, and they're also privately held pieces of land. So you've got some interesting developmental hurdles that have to happen if you want to see anything new there, and then obviously having a voice and having a say in kind of what that is. I think that the nature and the types of businesses that go in there will largely determine kind of what a small town, feel is. I actually grew up in a small town, so I kind of know what it is. One street. And then Phil, by the way, I echo that 100% on speeding. That nothing drives me more crazy having 3 little ones than having people rip up and down Timberline. So that's obviously a big deal. I would also, in terms of the small town feel, and I'm a coach, so I challenge people all the time. It's certainly a challenge for these folks and the people that might be on future councils to create an environment where we can hopefully facilitate a small town feel. But ultimately, it's up to y'all. It's up to us. It's not really totally about all the things that surround it. Our jobs, if on council, are to try to facilitate that. But it's really the individuals, the folks, getting out there and having conversations with one another, being out in the street, taking walks with the dogs, all those things. It's only so much of a city's responsibility to do those things. If you want a small town, you better get outside and start talking to people, and that's why I'm glad you're here tonight.
Thank you. Alec?
Yeah, so one of the things I would do is, focus on making decisions that would keep our single family, low density nature intact. A lot of information, or a lot of work went into the Strike Force survey, and I think that the Strike Force comprehensive plan, and there's a lot of good guidelines that we can follow from that I think will help preserve some of this small town feel. One of the other things I would say is just following the existing zoning that we have on the books. I feel like a lot of times we've been, speaking from some experience here recently, but we've had some issues that pop up that I just feel like, we're not doing that as great as we could do a better job of sticking with our zoning, because I feel like the zoning ordinances that we have in place were designed to help protect that small town feel in the first place. The other thing, the traffic thing, I will say that, I live on Rollingwood Drive, so I see the traffic and I see the speeding, and that is concerning. I actually thought it was mostly just Rollingwood Drive until I went around and started knocking on doors during the campaign and noticed that Timberline does have a very similar issue, and there's bigger hills around there too, which is concerning, and the streets aren't as wide in certain spots. So yeah, doing what we can to control traffic so that we got lots of kids riding around bikes, and it's yeah, we got to do whatever we can for the public safety of the children too. So maybe some sort of traffic study, but those are the three things. You know, I want to keep the single family nature of the neighborhood, and then that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question is, and the first person who will answer will be Emily. So in an extensive survey of Rollingwood residents, many said they want more restaurants and retail businesses along Bee Caves Road, which would also increase tax revenues for the city. Is that something you agree with? And if so, what suggestions do you have to make that happen?
So yes, I do agree that bringing, I think local businesses would be the place that I would start. I don't think we need another McDonald's or another, I think it was a Chinese food restaurant, not Chinatown, but another one, I think it was a Payway, I can't recall. But focusing on the local restaurant piece, I think that's a draw to continue the community aspect. And I think that having those sort of opportunities to enhance the commercial corridor and make it the space that we want it to be is really, really important. It provides opportunities for us to grow and really have an impact. I guess what I'm trying to say is I believe the commercial corridor and enhancing that also is sort of a part of the infrastructure piece and how we can focus on building that and making that those improvements. So if we think about those together, there's a way that we could really make some change in the city. So yes, that would be something that I would definitely focus on, and creating local business opportunities, and then how that would flow into creating and supporting infrastructure needs. To me, those go hand in hand.
Okay, thank you. Brooke?
Thank you. The issue on Rollingwood Drive has been addressed by, on Bee Caves Road has been addressed by the Comprehensive Task Force, and what is being recommended there would be to reduce the setbacks that would allow each commercial lot to have some greater building area. That, coupled with an effort to build additional walkways and provide safer walkways from our residential area to the commercial area where people could walk or take a bike or even a golf cart to a commercial area. Those are the plans those are recommendations that the strike force has come up with and are up for consideration by the City Council in the comprehensive plan. We talked with both businesses along Bee Caves Road and with the Westlake Chamber of Commerce in developing those plans and what specifically might incent newer developments and nicer, better retail and restaurants. I think we also have to realize that for Rollingwood, we can't solve all of our revenue needs with just increased sales tax revenue, which is pretty volatile, but we can help enhance the value of that commercial property by making it more attractive. And we can, I believe, after studying this issue on the Comprehensive Task Force, come up with a plan that will help us structure the debt service we need to do the infrastructure commitments that infrastructure projects that we have on the books today, the stormwater improvements and the water system improvements and our city hall improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Yes, I would definitely like to incentivize more restaurants and other commercial business out on our commercial corridor. One of the things that the comprehensive plan, as Brooke said, has been consistent in saying is that people want more restaurants, they want more choices, and they want walkability. We have some back entryways or potential back entryways that we have land that the city of Rollingwood owns that could be developed that would make it easier to have safer access to our commercial corridor, both for bicycles, for walkers, and potentially for golf carts. In addition to that, I think we just, as Brooke said, we've done a great job at compromising, reducing some of the setbacks while still protecting the neighborhood feel by adding more vegetation. Setbacks were pushed if you added more vegetation to buffer the existing residences to those areas. So hopefully we can incentivize more businesses to come into Rollingwood, to start doing redevelopment. Something that I've heard from a lot of people outside of Rollingwood is for as affluent a community as we are, our commercial corridor is in places quite sad. And so focusing on doing that, especially on the north side, would be a high priority for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, this question kind of piggybacks a little bit on the last one about the small town feel. I mean, so I mentioned that not every one of them, obviously. There's some pretty large plot sizes along that north side, but the majority, or too many, in my opinion, are probably, they're narrow. There's probably not a lot of room for parking, et cetera. So to Phil's point, I think it's really important, and it's addressed in the comprehensive plan as mentioned, is our ability as residents to support restaurants. It's all nice to say that we want more restaurants, but you see what happens in Westlake all the time is something opens and it's like, here one day, gone the next, just because it's really easy for us as Rollingwood residents to slide down the hill and go downtown and eat, right? So if we've got something that's a lot easier and almost advantageous and nicer to take our families to in an outdoor, i.e. a golf cart, a bike, or as you mentioned, walking sense, and have rear access to it, it gives us a greater opportunity as residents to support those businesses. And I think, what I mentioned in terms of it being a kind of a piggyback to the last question is those smaller kind of lot sizes almost dictate that it's not going to be some massive chain sort of operation. Like these are going to be smaller, boutique-ier type of, whether it be restaurants or shops, et cetera. So if you go and you take the extra effort and deploy the dollars that it would obviously take, and I don't know if it's one of these things where if you build it in terms of you create that back access, that all of a sudden there's a greater desire for people to come in and either buy those plots of land and develop them, or if you have to just kind of put that out in terms of the comprehensive plan and say, these are the sticks and carrots that we want you to see and understand as future developers, and come on here and let's redevelop this area. I'm not sure what has to happen first there, but you've got to figure out how you're going to deploy those dollars to get that done. And I think it begin to all work together, where you start to have a real walkable, very nice place to come in and, again, create that small town feel.
Thank you. Alec?
So yes, I'm for, encouraging restaurants to locate along our commercial corridor. I was pushing for this last summer on a different issue. I mean, I definitely am all for that. I'm also all for what everybody said here, talking about a back access down Edgegrove into our commercial corridor, improving, making that a safe way. One of the things I would also add there is that, there are residents that live right there. There are a couple houses that are right there. There's a green belt that was discussed. I mean, we're gonna want to talk to those residents to make, get their feedback on any idea like that as well. Is doing what we can to protect that. If we do this, protecting that green belt, so visually residents down along those cul-de-sacs aren't impacted. That would be one thing. So, I'm all in favor of what the strike force put together for the comprehensive plan. So using that as a guide for how we decide to develop. And I think there were some other discussions about there in that plan about if we're going to put restaurants in there, let's make sure that they're not creating a nuisance for, certain people. So that's another thing that I would definitely, consider before,
Sure.
making any decision along those lines. So thank you.
Thank you, Alec. Amy?
Great, thanks. Yeah, I echo that we do have an amazing amount of work that has just been done on the comprehensive plan, which I hope everyone will take some time to go and look through the draft that our strike force has just released, that you can go online and read, and we'll make sure that hopefully there's a way to connect with everyone who's been here about how to find it easily. But choosing to address something that has made it difficult for redevelopment to happen, which has been that we've had a 100-foot setback that was added when the what we call the Endeavor PUDs were put in place, the big Endeavor buildings that are at the end of B Caves Road now. When that PUD was developed, there was a moment where there was a 100-foot setback added in that PUD, and in addition, at the same time, all of the businesses that had already developed along that side of B Caves Road then moved from a 30-foot setback to a 100-foot setback. And so it's made it difficult for those properties to actually be redeveloped. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of code adjustments that can be put in place that go along with those setback recommendations that are in the comprehensive plan draft. I will also say that I think that there's still some opportunities to look at, once we get those comprehensive plan recommendations in place, what allows for restaurants to thrive in our community. Because we did, when the Mira Vista Shopping Center, when Trader Joe's is, when that was put in, there were 3 restaurants that were part of it. 2 were local restaurants and 1 was a chain restaurant. They had a lot of lunch business, but they didn't have a lot of dinner business. And they were also hard to see. And with our signage requirements, it was hard for them to have much visibility. Another kind of random thing that I was recently told by, I'll have to defer for that. But yeah, I look forward to seeing what we can do to improve
Sure.
the retail and the restaurants. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. So the next question will begin with Brooke. Citizens have complained that their city government does not communicate well with them. How would you propose to improve communication with residents on important issues?
I have several different proposals in that regard. The first one, I think, is to have an open forum for our residents to tell us what their concerns are. We've heard some of that through the Comprehensive Plan Task Force, but I think it's necessary for this important issue, which is transparency in our government and how we do these processes, to hear the concerns of the people who want to address those firsthand with the City Council. What I've seen done over the course of my career in other similar public situations where you're attempting to develop consensus is to hold workshops. Sometimes they're called stakeholder meetings, but they're a situation where residents can attend. They can ask questions of the engineers, they can ask questions of staff, they can get answers to those questions so that our community can understand what is behind a proposal, add their voice to that proposal before it comes to the City Council. I also think it would be good if we adopted a policy where any proposal to be voted on by the council is in writing and posted in the agenda before the meeting. Sometimes we have that only the night before, only the day of. There's not enough time to read it. I think we can adopt that policy up front. And I think we can also extend the time period between when notice of a meeting and the agenda packet is posted and the date the meeting is held. Currently, that's the minimum 72 hours. If the meeting's on Monday, the packet's posted on Friday night, and only those willing to spend their weekend and Saturday and Sunday reading it can effectively participate. So I think we can do those things, but I also want to hear from what the community would like to see in terms of communication.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Phil?
Yeah, I agree with Brooke that I think we have a lot of incredibly smart people here in Rollingwood. So for me to say that I have all the ideas and the answers is foolish. But starting off, what I would want is notices, and we used to have a newsletter in the water bill. If we were able to get that activated again, I think that would be one way of providing more notice. Our website can use some redevelopment to provide more notice. Additionally, I agree with Brooke that I think if we were able to extend the time periods that the agenda items are put out and have a deeper description of what is likely, what the likely outcome would be of, particular items, that would be useful as well. You can't tell what the outcome is because we have to have the open meeting, but it's not hard to identify what are going to be hot button issues for the community and making sure that those notifications go out. We also have the SWIFT 911, which are the phone calls that go out to everyone. That certainly could be used to make people aware of particularly potentially more hot button issues. So basically, using every form of communication at our disposal, and I'm sure I haven't hit them all, but I would start there. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris?
Well, I'm looking at him right now. Tom Farrell's back there, former mayor, and Tom's loves him a mini town hall, or maybe not a formal council meeting, but maybe to Brooke's point, a workshop, whatever you want to call it. I'd be all for that, on a semi-regular basis. Just potentially, selfishly, if I were to be lucky enough to get on council, I think those types of interactions can actually probably create a little bit more brevity to the council meetings, because there's going to be maybe a little bit better idea what the community as a whole is actually looking for. And I think Brooke makes some good comments about noticing and time. I think everybody here, regardless of your situation, I used to think I didn't have any time when I was about 22 years old, and then I had 3 kids and a job and everything, and things pop up, and before you know it, you get a meeting in front of you and you haven't had an opportunity to get prepared for it, et cetera. So maybe a little extra notice would go a long ways towards helping the community, be number one, aware, and obviously prepared for those meetings. To Phil's point, and I think it's one I've seen in my own personal business, for whatever reason, I've seen folks right in front of me, people that want to interact with our services will opt out of communications within our, when they're creating profiles. And I'll have to say, actually, we're not going to over notice you here. We're just, if we're closed because of snow, you're going to want to know this. And they'll sometimes still opt out because I think we're informationally overloaded. So, having a mechanism to get everybody in the community opted in, both texting as well as the Swift Reach program. But then also, one of our core values is at Train for the Game is adopting new school technologies. But I'm kind of an old school guy. It's pretty simple in a lot of ways to me. Is Eanes Elementary's got a big sign out front that's got what's going on. We could easily put those out in front of the neighborhood major entrances and just make sure people are aware in that way as well.
Thank you. Alec?
Yeah, so I'll pick up on the news. I agree with a lot of the things that were said here, everything actually. Well, maybe not the Eanes School Board thing, but right in front of my house. One thing that I would like to see on a newsletter is, if we're going to do it, which I think would be a great thing to do, is a newsletter that's written in a sort of a very plain fashion with no bias one way or another on what the project is or the item that's being discussed. Also, making sure that anything we put in that newsletter is correct, that there aren't mistakes, that there aren't data that's missing, or that's, So that would be the first thing, and I love the idea of a newsletter, but I would like to see it written in a non-biased manner and just stating the facts accurately. I love the idea of adding time for notice, because I mean, it's a lot to like, kind of, like I've been trying to follow what's going on with city council and all the other commissions, and yeah, it's just, I think if we could do it, I don't know what the, operationally, like what's, there might be some challenges, I don't know, but it would be nice to be able to extend that. And also to be able to get the agenda packet ahead of time as well versus just posting the item. If we could also have the agenda packet, I'm sure that sometimes it's hard to get all that stuff together, and I recognize that. But if we could try and improve that, it'd be great. The other thing that I would like to do is, we mentioned about these workshop models. One other option is if an item does hit city council first before it has a chance to be discussed broader, maybe just have a discussion only item versus like discussion and action. I've seen a lot of the agenda items are discussion and action. Be nice just to have maybe a discussion one first before being able to take a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Great. Yeah, I think this is a great question because communication is something that we can always be improving on. The council took the step recently this year of adopting a communication plan for the first time. And I think that will be a great roadmap for future councils to continue to review and build on. It was a lot of work, and I'm appreciative of the work that was done. I will also note that with that, we started adding one-sheets to the agenda items, and that's something that adds an extra administrative burden onto our staff. But I think that's a really good thing that we could be doing, and perhaps looking at whether there's additional information that residents are wanting on those one-sheets regularly. And then the other thing I have been thinking about, I appreciate Brooke's comment too about how do we give a little more notice about what's going to come up in the packet. And my concern is that there are some items that come up where I think there is a lot of time to be able to review things and make sure that the community has been able to look over every word. There are also standing agenda items that we have kept on our agenda now for several years, particularly related to BK's Road and MOPAC, because other agencies are having meetings, sometimes the same day as our council meeting or the day before our council meeting. And so I or another council member are listening to those meetings and then not sleeping that night or giving up our work time the next day to try to draft a resolution and have it so that at least the council could consider looking at it. And it might not be perfect yet, but that we want to be able to respond quickly for the community, especially in the area of transportation. So I do think it would be interesting to have a conversation about kind of distinguishing certain types of items that we would be able to hold for kind of more emergency response and others that we want more time to be able to review.
Sure. Thank you. Emily?
Would you just repeat the question one more time?
Sure, happy to. Citizens have complained that their city government does not communicate well with them.
Okay.
How would you propose to improve communication with residents on important issues?
Thank you.
Sure.
I mean, I don't disagree with what was set up here. I think this really holds true that there needs to be an implemented strategic communication plan and how that is rolled out and what that looks like. But I also think Chris said it really well. It's sort of the opt-in, opt-out. That's the piece that no one has control over. So how do we have that conversation with our community? I think the other piece that wasn't really discussed as well is how does this impact our city staff? And what does that mean? Does that require hiring another staff person, to write this newsletter or to have these open forums, which I agree, I think are very important, to create more time frame? I mean, that's something that we also have to think about as much as we want open and transparency, which I think is 100% important. How do we do that? And it may not be as simple as we think. And so really communicating and having a conversation with our community on what that would look like may take some time, but all for it and agree with all the things that were said here.
Thank you. Okay, Phil?
Yep.
Do you agree that the city has infrastructure problems? And if so, how would you raise the money to solve them? What problems would you tackle first? Drainage, new water lines, building a new city hall? That's a lot to think about, isn't it?
Sure. Well, that's the job that we will have should we be on the city council. yes, the city clearly has infrastructure issues and problems. All the things that you mentioned, the drainage, the water supply system, and the city hall, which also includes the police station, all are issues that will need to be addressed over time. Budgetary constraints mean that we will need to address these things in an incremental fashion. To your point, what I would focus on first is our water infrastructure. Any funding, first we should look to the funds that we have as a result of our property taxes and our general fund. But quite frankly, that's probably not going to get the job done because these infrastructures are so cost intensive. They're going to be incredibly expensive. Therefore, we need to fully vet them with full engineering reports and clear costs outlined, and provide the citizenry with kind of a menu of options and lists, and then have voted bonds to pay for these issues. The bonds, I'm thinking, would probably be paid over the expected lifetime of the infrastructure being addressed. Typically, that normally is around 20 years for most projects. And I would tackle water first. The current city council already has addressed the two most major drainage issues we've got, but we have a whole list of those, and those should be tackled as which ones are most severe and the biggest safety issues first.
Thank you. Chris, would you like for me to read it again, or are you fine?
I've got it.
Okay.
It's been a whole way around
Yeah.
sometimes. I need to read it. No, I think those are all worthy items. We've talked about them already to an extent. I think, well, we know the issues, right? Water, drainage, city hall. It's not going to get done with our existing funds. We're clearly going to have to do a bond. I think relative to the last question, the transparency piece, when you do a bond, everybody's really clear on, to your point, Phil, when you've got an established budget, you know the things that bond is going to be serving in terms of infrastructure. Everybody in the community is going to be really, really aware of all those dollars, where they're going, and why it's important. So, obviously the water and drainage is a big deal. I'd like to talk about City Hall for just a minute, whether it becomes a full-scale level it, redo it, or a remodel. I think it's important that we address it. One of the things I've noticed in all these, sort of community volunteer positions like councils of boards, et cetera, is that sometimes things, these boards change, these councils change, and the people that really support these council members and these boards, et cetera, are really key to have in place that kind of span all the different people that come up here and volunteer their time. So I've been in the talent business my whole life in terms of making sure I've got better talent than the next guy I'm competing against. And oftentimes you don't have very good talent. You're going to get beat no matter how good coach you are. I think personally we've got great talent in the city staff. And if I know environment's a big deal as well. At Train for the Game, we try to create a great environment so that our team likes to come to work every day and can be productive. When we start competing for talent against other cities, there's always going to be turnover in your staff. But if we don't have a place that we can house them, that they really enjoy coming to, especially when you consider the fact that, I don't know in terms of competitive salary base, but if they could live in Round Rock and get paid the exact same amount of money, and we've got kind of not so nice place to be, why would they just work up there? Let's do a good job in doing this with City Hall, make sure we retain our talent, and have a great staff to kind of go on throughout the councils.
Thank you. Alec?
Yeah, so the expenditures for these infrastructure projects are significant. 17 million for drainage, 5 million for City Hall, and there's an unknown amount for the water issue. At least I couldn't find anything about it. If I'm going to prioritize one of those things in day one, we'll probably look at the water issue first, but that's going to take an engineering assessment up front, because we have a map that shows a lot of the lines and locates where a lot of the breaks have occurred. We don't know, according to that map, like over what period of time that those breaks have occurred, but we'll need to figure out, it's not really obvious looking at that, like what the issue is. So I think getting an engineer out there to see, is it old pipes? Were the pipes installed properly? Is there any effect that a lot of the development and heavy trucks that we have coming through affecting that as well? We don't know, but we need to get to the bottom of what's happening and what the cost will be to fix it. In terms of financing any of these, we're gonna have to use a bond. My preference is to have multiple bond packages that target each one of these different projects and let the community, the voters, decide which projects they want to fund, not city council. That would be my preference of things.
Thank you. Amy?
So there are infrastructure problems. I think that was the first question. Yes. So the council authorized completing what's called a CIP, which is going to evaluate our entire water system, and the results of that should be coming in anytime in the next couple of weeks. So that has been funded and should be finished, and we should then have an evaluation of each of the different areas of our water system, what the issues are, and estimates of what it's going to cost to fix it. It is an unknown number right now. My preference would be to look for every possible funding source that we could take out once we get that evaluation to address what will likely be at the top of the list, which is the line over in the Vanceville area. Everything else that can be kind of moved to less urgent after that, I agree with the need to go out for a bond. The council has been deferring the opportunity to go out for a bond for several years now to make sure that we have a comprehensive plan in place so that we know why we're going out for a bond, what we've prioritized, and the amount of the bond may be large, but it's going to be something that allows us to then meet the goals that we've set for our community in the comprehensive plan. And so I hope that that's something that the voters will have the opportunity to participate in supporting the city and going out for a bond soon.
Thank you. Emily?
Agree with what has been said. I think the other part of this too that goes hand in hand with the water and the drainage that definitely needs to be addressed is the mobility of the city. I mean, the most recent rainstorm that we had, Edgegrove, you couldn't leave the city of Rollingwood. And so thinking through, which as a part of the strike force, they spent a lot of time looking at that particular area and how do we maybe have a quick fix for that, and then think long term, which would entail I believe, enhancing the commercial corridor, maybe a Katy Trail sort of concept behind, which has been articulated somewhat in the strike force plan. So I think that is really important. The city hall. I mean, if you haven't spent time in this building and with the staff, like it is a disservice to yourself. You really should spend the time with the people here. They're wonderful and they are working so hard for us, and so we should be able to provide them a great space. The thing I also think that's really important here with not just having our own police force, which is wonderful, but the opportunity to have a substation firehouse. And that's a piece that the community, I hope, knows about. And that is something that the Westlake Hills wants to fund part as well, which we should be taking advantage of that opportunity. To your point, Amy, about taking the money, using the funds that are in front of us, but also what are some other sources that we could utilize that for. So I think that is also important. I also believe the bond piece is important, but I think we should also get really creative. I mean, the bond piece, the property tax money, the sales tax money. I mean, how do we create a wonderful strategic plan to do the things that we want to do? That is where I'd love to dig deep and spend some time on. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chris, you get the next
No,
question.
no,
Oh,
Brooke.
I'm sorry, Brooke. Forgive me.
Not a problem. Not a problem at all. I've spent a career helping public utilities, including municipal utilities, develop long-range capital planning. And so I don't want to come across as a guru on this, but I've spent time doing that. What I see here is that we've had proposals, we've identified the problem through various studies, but we haven't really dug down to vet the costs that are in those plans. That would be the first thing, I think, and a very important thing to do. We know from the Nixon Pleasant Drive drainage problem that by Councilmember Gavin Massengale and Sarah Hudson worked with the engineers. They were able to cut that cost in half from what it had been in the proposal. So we really do need to take the time, do the work, vet the costs that are in those plans first. Then we'll have an idea of how much it's going to cost to fix these problems, which we have estimates now, but we really don't have a firm cost. The next step would be, again, as others have mentioned, set the priorities once we know those costs. You can fund those in a staged way if necessary, and the way to get there is to find out what is an acceptable increase to the tax rate if you were going to do a bond. What that is the tax rate would go up by the annual debt service on that bond. We don't know if we're talking about a 20-year bond, a 30-year bond. We don't know. We can, and the city has good bond advisors to identify what those costs are. And once you have the costs, then you can say, we can take care of A, B, and C this year or over the next 5 years. We can take care of D, E, and F over the next 10 years, or some combination. But that's the work to be done. And I think we can get the consensus if we involve the community in what the plan is, that the costs are as cost effective as they can be, and what the long-term plan is for getting these 3 major projects accomplished.
Thank you, Brooke. Okay, Chris, really now.
Okay.
What revenue generating ideas do you have, and how would you implement them?
Well, I think it just goes back to, there's you've got long looks and you've got more, short looks on producing revenue, or not even revenue, but just being the ability to pay for things. It's been talked about already pretty extensively. Our corridor is a big deal. Getting the sales tax revenue out of that as best we can, as fast as we can, obviously responsibly, is key. But in my opinion, that's a long look. We can dangle all the sticks and carrots out there that we want in terms of setbacks, et cetera, developing some sort of walkability plan. But ultimately, that's up to private landholders what they want to do, and in terms of the economic ramifications of that. So I don't know that when we talk revenue. I mean, a bond obviously is not revenue, but it's funds. That's the place that we've talked about already. We've got to look at those spots, but we've also got to obviously try to go develop that corridor responsibly. I don't know that it's any more complicated than that. We've got things we've got to get addressed. There's priorities that we've got to try to get established. What can get done? What's it going to cost? To everybody's point, go try to make it as advantageous to go get as much sales tax revenue as you can, and then beyond that, we've got to figure out some things we've got to pay for right now. So that's exactly how I'd approach it.
Okay, thank you. Alec?
Yeah, so, I mean, I agree. We should focus on the commercial corridor. I mean, we all of us want to improve that. All of us want to see that develop, see retail, see, sources of sales tax income there. And I definitely think it probably will take some time too, to get all that up and running. The other, one of the things I would also want to understand, I mean, we have like uses for this revenue. I mean, obviously we have lots of drainage issues and all the infrastructure problems that we've talked about that could be, uses for this revenue. I don't think that the sales tax and so forth that we generate off of that will be enough to pay for all this stuff anyway. So that kind of goes back to the bond issue of like, we might need to do that if we wanted to tackle some of these things. I mean, I noticed, like just today, according to the sales, I think the strike force plan, I read through that, the draft, final draft. There's a breakdown of what our revenues are right now, and I think half of our city income comes from property tax, which was maybe not half, maybe a third, like 1.2, 1.3 million. From property tax. We also, the sales tax we get on the existing corridor is about $800,000, just to give you some context of things. So if we start that's what that is. If we improve it, I mean, how much higher is that? How much higher can we get that? Maybe we can get 5 times that. Maybe we can get 10 times that. It's hard for me to imagine that though right now. So, but yeah, I mean, when you ask where can we get more revenue, that would be my preference, is to look on the commercial corridor for that revenue versus other sources. So.
Thank you, Alec. Okay, Amy?
So we have property taxes that we can get revenue from. We're going to cap out at some point in time on the number of properties in our residential area that can be redeveloped significantly. We still have some that can't be. The commercial corridor is clearly an area where we could be increasing commercial property values and sales tax. There's an area that I will be honest that I'm not an expert at, but I've wondered if we might be at a place in our community where it could work, is to be looking at very specific projects in the community that are well vetted, that the numbers have been really looked at by the city, and that we look at a larger fundraising campaign of some type or endowment that would help fund some things in our city. Two of the things I've been thinking about are, what if we had an endowment for our park? Again, I have no expertise in this, but I know we probably have people in our community who do. And the other project that I personally would love to see, if there was a desire among people in our community who would be able to participate with larger contributions and smaller, but we would need some larger ones probably, would be funding the repair and improvement of the Edgegrove Bridge to make it walkable and also safe for our police officers and ourselves and others during water storms or rainstorms, because it's a project that it may or may not end up getting to go in the bond package. I'm not sure, but it's one that I think is really important. So those are some thoughts I've had, and I think that our community is at a point where I keep on being told just raise our taxes by some people, and other people say don't raise our taxes. And so I think our taxes are something that we're going to have to look at the bond capacity and how we use our taxes in the future for that. But I wonder if our community might rally around a few things for fundraising.
Thank you. Emily?
You took the words right out of my mouth. As the fundraiser in the room.
You are.
Right. We've talked about the commercial corridor. We all know that is, a place that we should spend some time on, that the revenue generation there would be great, right? But where I grew up, a lot of individuals in that community in Fort Worth, Texas, they created endowments for the city. I love this city, and we all know no one gets offended when you ask them for money. People get offended when they're not asked. And so how do we create, to Amy's point, these great projects? I mean, people that have lived in this community 20, 30, 40, 50 years, those opportunities, if we do it right, we can honor those lives, which is amazing, create some sustainability in infrastructure and the beautifying the park, the bridge. I mean, there's so many things that we can do, and I can't, if we did take a show of hands in the room right now, I can't imagine one person in this room not raising their hand to say, I would contribute, right? Right? No one's raising their hand. Come on, people. Right. And to Amy's point, there are some wealthy individuals in our community that if we approach it in the right way, it could really benefit us. But I also believe fundraising is like friend raising. You have to get the big boulders in the cup, and then you got to get the sand and the little pebbles. And we have to have all of those pieces. Again, the thing that is sort of my mantra for my campaign is together we can make decisions. And if we don't do that together, we're going to lose some great things in the city. So I agree. I think some private philanthropy would be a wonderful idea. And I'm not afraid to ask for it.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Brooke?
Thank you. I've thought a lot about this. We have some opportunity, even within our existing tax rate structure, to do some of these projects. We have some debt that will be paid off in the next few years. We have some debt that's the current 8-year tax notes can be refinanced and extended over a long period of time. That will provide some room for a longer term tax bond. we have an increasing market value in our tax base, the property tax base. I think it's almost 20% this year. We could make a commitment to take most of that increase, maybe for the next 10 years, and use it for funding the debt service for these bonds we've talked about. There are some incremental ways that we can begin to address these problems without an enormous tax burden on an additional tax burden other than our increasing property tax base on our residents here. We also should expect to see some increases in our sales tax because of the change in the state rule that will return sales tax to the community where the buyer is rather than where the delivery warehouse, the Amazon warehouse is. And that should take effect this fall. I don't know that we know how much that will be, but it should be significant, especially for a community like Rollingwood that does a lot of online purchasing. We should also spend and perhaps ask one of our staff people or one of our council members to devote their time to seeking revenue from TxDOT and from the State Water Board, state revenues that are available for projects or parts of projects that we would be funding. Those would be my top priorities in the immediate term. And I love the idea of a foundation. If y'all have seen what was done with Waterloo, that was a community, public, private, and we could look at something like that for our Eames Creek. So thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Much has been said of, focusing on redeveloping our commercial corridor, and that needs to be done. Our properties, as they get redeveloped, there is naturally an appreciation, so we are going to be getting more tax revenue as a result of redevelopment and just natural appreciation of our properties. Unfortunately, also, our costs are likely to increase, so we can't be certain that our revenue is going to increase quicker than that. I like the idea of an endowment, something similar to the Town Lake Trail Foundation or the Waterloo, as Brooke said. We should be looking if there are any federal funds or state funds available. Certainly, we could devote the time to go and see if we can apply and get any of those funds. As Brooke mentioned, there is actions before. I know in other municipalities it's called the Wayfair bills. If people want to look that up, you can look up the Wayfair bill. That basically, for merchants such as Wayfair and Amazon, rather than the sales tax being assigned to the distribution center, it's assigned at the point of delivery. As Brooke said, we have a lot of people that order online, especially during the pandemic. That amount of Amazon deliveries has just exploded. That will also be additional revenue. I don't know if the comptroller is going to be right on top of that immediately, but certainly if they aren't, we can nudge them along as much as possible to try to get those funds as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, last question. And we'll start with Alec. What improvements, if any, would you like to make to the Rollingwood Park?
So the Rollingwood Park is, I love the park. I live pretty close to the park. I think it's a wonderful resource for our community. Westlake Hills doesn't have anything like it. So it's pretty unique to what we have, and I think that we should try to preserve it the way it is. Now, we can improve things, like I know through the comprehensive planning process, there were some surveys done, and a lot of the residents made some comments about how they would like to see some improvements with trees, or maybe adding some walking trails, that kind of thing. So I would be totally supportive of any improvements like that. I would like to see a community volunteer more in the park. I haven't seen that as much. If we want to plant some trees, I'd like us, maybe a couple days a year, we can have a volunteer day and get out there and do some of the work ourselves. I think that would be a good way to, build, some, maybe make some new friends and build some, community spirit. The other thing, this goes back to the fundraising piece from the previous question. I think if we had something like that for the park, that would be another way to pay for some of these improvements. And there's also, our CDC does have some capability to be able to fund capital improvements to the park. But my preference, honestly, is to raise money for it, or have volunteers get out and make those improvements. So
Thank you. Amy?
I really appreciate the work that the Parks Commission is doing right now of looking at making sure that there's equitable costs being shared among anyone who's using the park, and making sure that the park is generating funds sufficient so that we can continue to maintain it as well, given the uses. And so I think that the Parks Commission is an important body, and generally defer to the work that's happening there, especially because I served on the Parks Commission for 3 years and worked through putting a Parks Master Plan in place, and that's really what the Parks Commission is charged on working towards. So I've seen the Parks Commission functioning well and looking at projects that are in the master plan, looking at the policies that are impacting the park right now, and I think that that has an effect of improving the park, because people are seeing small changes that improve their experience there, and so I appreciate that work there.
Thank you. Emily?
This was one of the questions that Ryan Clinton asked us, and very similar response to what Amy had said. Is we have a group of volunteers who signed up and are on the Parks Commission, and they're doing a great job. So I would lean heavily on their thoughts. We also have a park master plan, and how are we moving that forward? I think, again, like you said in the very beginning, Suzanne, is individuals have set up here and dedicating their time, and we should really lean on the resources of their knowledge of what they're doing, of how to move that forward. I think the other thing that's really important to mention is the amount of people that use our park that don't live in our community, right? And so how do we address and tackle that? Is it a donation box, or, because let's be honest, I've been at the park, we have 2 little kids. People don't pick up their trash. Half the time we get there, I'm picking up the trash or the dog poop or whatever it is, right? And I think that is really important. The idea of a community cleanup day is great, but I think we've got to be more focused on the outside individuals who are coming to use the park, and they're not taking care of it. And so how, as a community, can we do our part to take care of it? I don't know, maybe we should send a bunch of 3-year-olds out there and scare them all away. But it's a great place. We enjoy it. But I think there needs to be a dedicated focus on what is the Park Commission doing, how do they see the Park Master Plan moving forward, and how, as a city council and a community, can we aid and help them to have that progress. So thank you.
Thank you. Brooke?
Thank you. The residents of Rollingwood have recognized the park as one of our jewels. It's very important to them. I think realistically, at the current time, to actually fund improvements, we would have to rely on volunteer help, and potentially, I believe there's some source of funding from the RCDC that could also contribute to maintaining or improving infrastructure within the park. So there are some available sources of revenue, and I think it's a great idea to encourage volunteerism in the park. In the past, we've done lots of fun things. We've had the park paving project. The pavers in the park was a community-led fundraising effort that paid for the trees and for some of the improvements in the lower park. We could do that with the upper park, and we need to make sure, as Amy said, that our park leases are covering the cost of the usage that they make of the park. Other than that, there was not a consensus to make changes in the uses of the park at this point in time. So I would not recommend any changes to the uses of the park, but would support further fundraising, looking at some of the existing sources of revenue, and being more intentional about how we use that for improving the park. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
For those that don't know, I'm the current chair of the Park Commission. As everyone has said, it's very common for our citizenry to cite the park as the crown jewel of Rollingwood. I think we all enjoy the park. We have a variety of constituents that use the park, and I think we need to be mindful of the various constituencies that use the park and allow them to continue to do that and promote it. The park has a restrictive covenant that gives preference to youth sports. That has been respected and maintained. That should be continue to be respected and maintained. I'm not in favor of adding any more infrastructure until we're able to adequately maintain our current infrastructure. And I think if we, right now, one of the things that has been a thorny issue for us for quite some time is the fencing up on the fields, up on the upper park. We donated the money from the Pep Paver project to Western Hills softball and baseball, t-ball, to help them in their ability to repair those. And that was done to kind of bridge some of the contention between various user groups. What I would like to do is continue that and tamp down some of this contention that we have as far as the use and management of our park. We really need to see what do we want Rollingwood to be. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, there's a reason why Amy's on the council already. That's the best ideas I've heard, is the endowment. I think it also, when you do that, I'm not exactly sure all the parameters around an endowment, but I think it's important, and there's already a plan in place, right, with a master plan with respect to the park. It's important to identify, what you want to do with that money first, because when you start putting money forth, that might give you a voice that may be perceived a little bit more importantly than some others. So if we could go ahead and, ahead of time and say, these are the things we really want to get accomplished in the next, 10 years, and that endowment will go a long ways towards serving those needs. I think that's a big deal. I think also I'd like to echo some of the other folks here when they, speak highly of the Park Commission. I think it's important, not just these council meetings, that citizens show up to those meetings. We've got to trust people in those, I guess, sub-commissions or sub-boards. We've got to trust people that they've got the best interest of the community in mind, that they've been brought together, by the council themselves, and that they're going to have the best ideas and the most insight on a particular subject matter. I think that goes across the board, not just for parks. So I'd love to see more citizens show up to those meetings as well. And I think that would also be a platform for folks to be heard. We've talked about transparency. We've talked about being able to have a voice in the community. There are other opportunities. There's a level of personal responsibility that we all have as citizens. If we want to be informed, certainly our city government needs to go out of its way to make sure that's, we've got that information. But I'd also put it on you, me, et cetera, all of us, that we've got to get our butts to these meetings and make sure we know what's going on. Otherwise, we can expect to be surprised. That's just human nature. So we got about 10 seconds left. Let's trust the folks that they're on these boards and commissions, and especially on the park. We like those folks.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Now we're going to open it up for some questions from the audience, and then we'll have closing statements from you. Does anyone have a question?
Miss Suzanne, how long would you like for time?
Well,
Are you going to allow each candidate to answer the same question?
Tom, what would you like to say?
Well, I have a question.
Okay. Well, it seems like it would be fair to have everybody answer the question. I don't know. What do y'all think?
I would agree.
Okay,
Suzanne, I got an idea.
yes.
How about if we want to?
Yeah.
We
Okay,
raise our
if you want
hands.
to. How's
Yeah.
that?
And a minute for a response?
Yes.
Fair? Okay.
And should we start with Alex since he's,
I think Amy's done.
let's see.
Good.
Okay.
Right out of the gate.
Oh, yeah, Amy is the next one, I'm sorry.
Listen, first of all, thank you. This is wonderful that you were willing to do this, and you did a
Oh.
great job on that.
Thank you.
And we all
My
appreciate it.
pleasure.
And thank all of y'all for running and doing this. There's no city in the world that would just not love to have any of y'all be on their council, I can tell you. This is just great. And anybody that's willing to spend their time and effort for free, and y'all do all know that this is not a paid position. So, but my questions are, and I appreciate the fact that it seems to me that we are all looking at the same type of issues and recognize what the issues are internally. There are two issues that are external to our city that are potentially have a very negative impact on many of our citizens. And I'm just going to ask if you have a thought on how to address those two issues that I have. The first one is CTRMA, which is a toll road, is considering putting in a toll lane, which may or may not be an upper deck on Mopac, which the noise level on that could adversely impact many of our citizens that live, especially in the eastern part of Rollingwood. And that's one question, or part of it. The second one is, the city of Austin is looking at a master plan for Zilker Park. And as part of that consideration, there's been a lot of things that's been how they handled that piece of property that's at the very end of Rollingwood Drive next to Mopac. And that, some of the thoughts that come up from them have been parking garage, music venue, all of which can have a negative impact to some of our residents. So we have two big agencies, or one big agency, one big city government that we have to deal with. And if you just kind of address how, if you have any thoughts on how to best deal with those two issues to give Rollingwood a voice at the table on those decisions that might be made that affect us. Thank you.
Are we going in order,
I have 1 minute.
Amy?
Yeah.
Good luck.
Make it snappy.
All right, on CTRMA and toll lanes, I've been working on this issue since 2014, and I think that I would sum it up in what Joe Basham said to me one time. He was on our city council at that time when he was rolling off, and he appreciated the advocacy that I was doing, trying to advocate for design alternatives to double decking the entire eastern side of our city, which is what was initially proposed. By saying, I know that you'll follow this through to the end, even if you have to chain yourself to the bulldozer to keep them from starting the project. So that has been we have a lot of advocacy that doesn't require chaining oneself to bulldozers, but I think continuing to have legal counsel that is at the ready to provide advice to us on the issue, and also having council members who are specifically designated to address that project is important. The other thing that's about to come up is members of the CTRMA board may roll off, and having a plan for recommending some people that the Travis County Commissioners Court would consider appointing to those spots so that we continue to have a voice on the board.
Sounds like you would be a
Sorry,
good
that's-
voice on that board.
Oh, you can't be an elected official.
Oh.
So I'll find somebody else.
So I think, I followed a bit of the toll road stuff, and I agree with you, Amy. I really don't have much to add on that besides having the legal support and advice and being advocates there. I think the Zilker Park master plan is, that is a sensitive thing, right? I think as a community, we have to decide, how do we tackle that? Do we purchase that land? Do we work with the city of Austin where we have an agreement where when it's ACL or all the other activities that we provide the police service? I don't want to see a parking garage go up there. I don't want to see, yes, it'd be nice to have a concert venue there, but that's not going to bode well for the community, right? And so that is one where an open forum with our community, talking about what we could do to get our arms around that, I think that is definitely something that we should be tackling. Absolutely. Time is up.
Okay.
1 minute. That goes fast.
I don't have a lot of depth of knowledge on either of those two issues, but I think in addition to having someone on call for the city legally on these issues, we need to communicate this to our residents and make every one of our residents an advocate on these issues. We can do some things within the council, but we can mobilize the people of this community to be an army on these two issues. And with respect to Zilker Park, I would engage very directly with the City of Austin and whoever or whatever committee with the City of Austin is addressing that issue. It seems to me that they want to do something with that property, perhaps. It is park property. That's going to be difficult. And if there is a way that we can ensure that if something's going to be done, we have something to trade for it, then I think that puts us in the best place. We have property along Mopac, property behind the Endeavor, the property where the church is now, were they to sell at some point in time, that we could encourage the City of Austin to look at and not look at that, what was the old firing range for these projects. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, both of these proposals would have really, there's no other way of putting it, devastating effect on the surrounding residents over there on Vale and over on the bottom end of Timberline and Rollingwood Drive. I agree that we have a lot of very active, very intelligent people in the community. I would engage the community as much as possible to attend whatever meetings that might be planning these kinds of actions. And in addition to the city hiring legal staff, I imagine we have many attorneys in our community, some of whom are on our city council, who could take action to try to prevent or at least slow down these actions.
Thank you. Chris?
Well, I think it's a good example of why you show up to these kind of meetings. I would imagine by a raise of hands that probably not too many folks here knew about that. I don't have, like Brooke, I don't necessarily have a depth of knowledge here on either one. I know that they fly in the face of what's, hopefully going to be, looked at but adopted as a comprehensive plan that the strike force put through. It would, we'd take all these efforts to try to push setbacks forward, get commercial businesses, where, it's enticing for them to be there, and then all of a sudden we're going to put a flyway through where they don't even have to stop if they don't want to, and potentially buy, goods or food and beverage that the city would benefit from. The adjacent properties to us, this is kind of the issue, right? We're a small town, and we want to be considered and thought of and live in a small town feel, but yet we are next to a monster in terms of a growing city. I think finding the leverage points, like what do we have, and understanding what kind of leverage we have, if any, over an entity like that, figure what that is. But in addition to leverage, let's try to cooperate and get them to see that, why maybe that would be a bad idea. So going down both of those avenues, trying to understand where we've got some strength and where they'd want to do well with us.
Saved by the bell. Okay.
My entire career, I've had whistles blowing. So, and they're usually officials, and we don't usually like to listen to them. So.
Okay, Alec?
Yeah, obviously, I think that I understand the impact that these would have to the residents and into our neighborhood. And I would do whatever I could and whatever it took to make sure that we have a voice in best we can. I think the what I know that I could do, like to help solve this, is look into the community to find experts and people that have done this kind of work before, and leverage that asset, the assets that we have in this city, to help solve it. And so that, I mean, I would say that my expertise on this right now is one, and like, this is the task that needs to be done. I can execute the task and make sure that it gets done properly with the right support behind me. And I think that we'd have that support in the community to, you know, go after this and fight for it. I also do think it's kind of interesting, like, I mean, I'm sure we couldn't afford it, but it would be nice if if we did own that park space down there.
Yes.
But, yeah, so.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a question?
I got a quick question. There used to be a firing range? Is that right?
Yes,
the
pistol
police.
range.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Ask this man in the white shirt over here, because he's,
Is that right?
You frequented it?
uh-huh.
Oh, I thought he was coming to ask a question.
Also means
That's
that
Fidel,
we're gonna
my
have
significant
huge
other.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty cool.
Anyone else have a question? Shanti? Yes.
He did, he did
Oh,
Boy
well,
Scouts there.
overruled.
Some of you know this, but I've served on the council and I know how much work it takes to listen to everybody, but that's the job we undertake when we become council members. I served 2 terms, and it seems like a very long time ago, but it seems also like yesterday. Some people have described the need for, okay, let me phrase it this way. How would you address the intergenerational issues that are being talked about now as the older people and the younger people? Believe it or not, we were the young ones when we came in. I was a stroller mom when we came here in the 80s, and now I'm a grandmother. But we walk around in the neighborhood and we are known as the granny pack. So we do a service to the young ones that are coming in. Our voices are important. I never thought of it being a young voice and an older voice. So my question is, how would you address the aging population in this community? We are just 1,400 registered voters. Is it 1,400 people also? I don't know. But anyway, young and old, we really don't want to make it us versus them. How would you address that? Thank you.
Emily, you want to take that one?
So, I think in the world that we live in today, the us versus them, the David versus Goliath, those sort of things are just going to exist in our world, right? And we as a community have to decide, are we going to set that nonsense aside and actually make sure that all voices are represented? You know, coming into this community, I felt very strongly of, we're young family, we're going to meet people, and that wasn't always necessarily met with positivity. And a big part of why I sit on RCDC and why I'm here today is I said, look, I want to make sure that my voice is heard and that I'm represented. And so I hear what you're saying, Shanti, and I it's hard to pretend that that doesn't exist, but if we consciously make the effort to address it, then all those stigmas can sort of fade away. I mean, let's be honest here tonight, how many young families are represented? Not many, because they're at home with their kids, right? So that is a piece, that's why I say that. We need to make sure that we have those voices in meetings, showing up, watching the virtual feed. I know, I'm at the Oscars, hold on, I'm not done yet. And that stigma stops. I mean, I think to your point, we've got to make sure that we're bringing people together. So yeah, we have to address it for sure, but it is the elephant in the room.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you. When I retired, I was not very active in this community other than serving as a municipal judge for 3 years because of the pressures of my law practice. When I retired in 2017, Fidel and I made it a point to get to know the young neighbors across the street. We had them over for happy hour Then we had them over for happy hour and invited Martha Hudson and Flo to come and talk to them about where the park came from and what the relationship of Rollingwood and Wild Basin is, and some of the things of this community that have made it what it is today. And that's been a very positive experience. I think it's something we need to do intentionally. I think it's part of the issue of transparency, and that we be intentional in holding some community discussion about what these divisions are and putting them to rest. It's a worthy goal, in my opinion, and I think it will open up the process. I believe in my heart it's not old people pushing young people back or vice versa. It is the fact that we don't have a good enough basis on which to communicate and address these issues, and we can do that.
Thank you, Brooke. Phil?
I may be the odd man out on this issue. I don't see these huge divisions. I've been thrilled that young families have moved in around me as I raised 5 boys in the house, and they're off, and having 2 new boys across the street from me and a boy and a girl across the street from me have been a huge just joy, frankly. I think having more areas that have cross-generational participation is the answer. It's hard to have prejudice once you get to know people. And that's part of why I'm so adamant that our park remain open for all generations to help that. We're going to have turnover in families over time.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, Phil, I'll pick up for right there, man. I think it's proximity, and I think it's those opportunities to get to know one another. It's amazing how we live our busy lives and we go into our homes, and people don't come out. Our little cul-de-sac in Ewing Circle, I recall when my kids were just a little bit smaller, we'd have 30 or 40 kids out streaming around. But at the time, there were 2 older ladies that lived in the cul-de-sac as well, and they got to know all the kids and the families there, and it wasn't a generational issue at all. There's a great deal of wisdom. I happen to work with a whole lot of folks that, I politely call them in the 4th quarter. And they've got a lot of wisdom to share. How you view it, I think, to your point, Phil, once you get to know somebody, is you don't necessarily see them as young or old. You just see them as somebody who's lived an experience, has a story, and that story's informative. And there's a lot to be learned there. So just having the proximity, having those opportunities to get to know one another, I think is key.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I feel like I'm in a weird spot because, I don't think of myself on the older side, but I know that there's a lot of younger kids, a lot of younger families with kids in here than mine. Mine are I got a daughter that's about to graduate from high school already.
A little
It's
gray
kinda
up there.
crazy.
You get a little gray.
And I got a little gray going on through this past 6 months of giving this to, but yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't have problems, talking with either the older or the younger. Maybe and it's been hard because of the whole pandemic, but we used to have the Rollingwood, the 5K. We used to have things that we would get together, and maybe just having more things like that. I mean, I don't have any specific examples other than that, but where people can just meet each other. Maybe that would go some. Maybe that would have some effect in being able to improve the situation that Shanti's referring to.
Sure.
So.
Amy?
I really appreciate that question in view of this weekend we had Flo's Memorial, and I was thinking about how I was always included as a younger woman with the Rollingwood Walkers, and there were times that I would show up at Trianon and be invited into the room and just get to hear so much wisdom. And so when you asked the question, it made me think about, I wonder what that equivalent coffee room space could be now for connecting more generations, because I found so much value from it. And it's fallen away because of Trianon moving, and my schedule is different as well. But I think that looking for more ways that we can bring together different generations and acknowledge that sometimes it is easy to stay within our own peer group, but the value of going outside of your own peer group.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, yes.
Do you want me to go? Or, yes, please.
However you want.
I don't have a loud enough voice. Another report. Thank you all so much for putting your name in the hat, your name in the hat and stepping up and just wanting to come out and serve our community. And obviously there's collaboration that has to take place when you are on council. And if y'all have served in one of our wonderful commissions, what's been one of the successful initiatives that you've been able to pass through? And then how are you able to achieve that? Because as you see on our agendas, they're quite lengthy, and it does take a lot of effort and collaboration. So just be curious to see what you are most accomplished with if you've served in a commission, and then how are you able to achieve that and be able to pass it through?
Who are we on right now?
We're with Brooke.
Okay. My most recent service has been on the strike force, as I've mentioned a couple of times. When we began to talk about the commercial corridor, it took a few meetings to get to the point where we had a consensus with respect to doing setback issues and things of a purely zoning code nature. But then I brought forward an initiative to add landscaping design, wise water initiatives, some kind of incentive program to have those things adopted that would make that would allow the commercial development to be more aesthetically pleasing, more planet pleasing, and we were able to work through that. So that would be my most recent initiative. And I thank you. I'm out of time.
Okay. Phil?
On the Park Commission, one of the things that I can point to is we started managing the watering of the upper fields slightly better. But one thing that didn't exist before is through some volunteers, some of whom were on the Park Commission and some of whom are in the room here, we created a new butterfly garden, and working with the City Council, we just recently got a water line run so that we can keep that adequately watered. We're very appreciative of that. I don't know if it's just me, but I've been noticing a lot more butterflies through our community here lately, and every time I see them, I'm kind of like, we have food for you right over there, you know, and it's just brought me joy.
We've put butterfly and bee-friendly planting in the commercial landscaping initiatives.
Chris, you have anything to say?
Well, I've been chair of the BOA, which is Board of Adjustments. We do variances and stuff like that. So in terms of success, every meeting that we can get through without somebody crying or yelling at one another is a pretty good one. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm sitting here listening to everybody, and I'm starting to understand. I'm pretty good usually with confrontation, and I'm starting to kind of understand maybe why I'm on that board now. Because about every time we get through it, regardless of the outcome, you know, you've usually got somebody that's either upset or you know, either board members or maybe the folks looking for a variance. But I do think that generally speaking, that the successes within that board are, even if a resolution hasn't been reached, that potentially the applicant is looking for, that we've done it in a way that you know, empathetic, you know, to why, you know, they're not able to get what they might want to get, et cetera. And so in that way, I think those kind of define the successes within our own board, is just, dealing with all the range of emotions, and obviously dealing with some disappointments that happen as a result of the nature of what we look at.
Okay. Alec?
Well, I haven't been on a commission, but I can tell you that I've had success in helping preserve our parkland. And that means a lot to me, and I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish on that. So.
Thank you. Amy?
So I'm having a hard time remembering all the things that I did on Parks Commission, because that was a while back, but if it's okay, I think one of the things that I really enjoy having worked on is the tree ordinance that our city had. We didn't have anything that protected our trees. We had a group of residents from Park Hills who came and just asked, what can we do to not have all these lots that are just getting clear cut for spec homes. And so that initiated kind of a 9-month process where we had 9 months of every council meeting for 9 months, looking at an ordinance, considering amendments, getting public feedback, amending the ordinance to reflect that public feedback. And I think one thing that's important is that the ordinance that I worked with Councilmember Hunley on it, the one that we initially put up, we probably could have passed the first meeting or the second meeting, I would guess, but we worked through it to make sure we had an ordinance that really reflected our community values and had 5 votes. And I think that that was important for that type of ordinance.
Thank you. Okay.
So I sit on RCDC, and I would say this is, I've only been on it a year, so the success was seen taking a potential idea and bringing it to council. And it was a very hot topic. We'll just leave it at that. But I think the success out of that was to see the number of people in the community that came out and spoke and were vocal. And I think that, to me, was the success. I feel like sometimes on these committees and councils, Chris said it many times, we kind of operate in a vacuum. And to be able to see the community step up, be vocal, no matter where you sat on the issue, I was really proud of that. So it wasn't necessarily a success in the sense that it was a project that RCDC could work on, but to see the community voice, I really was proud of that. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay. Now, would you like to do closing statements? Do you feel like you still need to do that? Okay. Well, let's start with Phil.
Okay.
Yes, 1 minute.
I thought we were getting 2 minutes for
All
closing
right.
statements.
2 minutes?
That's what I understood that we had.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll use less than that. Okay.
I'll yield
Okay.
my time.
Right.
I'll yield
All
a
right.
piece of it.
Okay.
20 seconds.
Thank you again for all of you being here this evening. Over the past few weeks, I've knocked on many of your doors. Some of you I haven't knocked on your doors because you already knew me and time was limited. But what I've heard repeatedly is that you want reliable, stable infrastructure. You want to feel safe in your homes. You want to feel that your children are safe. You want your city government to focus on providing those services, and you don't want to be caught off guard by extraneous initiatives, especially those that would directly impact you. You've heard a lot of voices on where we've all stood on the issues tonight. If you have any questions, I would invite you to take a flyer. It has my contact information. Reach out, contact me. I'd be glad to answer any questions. I hope through promoting transparency and communication that we can start to create a stronger bond within our community and have more cohesion and more inclusivity as has been expressed here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I just appreciate everybody being here this evening. Outside of obviously thinking that I've got a few things that I can offer on council, more than anything, I'd like, and probably the point of me throwing my name in the hat is I'd like to do it in a way, if elected, invites more people into the process of city government. I really am a believer. Again, I obviously recognize the importance of the council, but these subcommittees and boards that exist oftentimes don't have the level of attendance, if you will, that both in terms of committee members, but even as board members. And so what I'm hoping to get done is operate in a way where more people, whether it be, because we meet with one another more often, know each other more, know the issues more, even know the existence of some of these boards and what they do. I think that is the key, in my opinion, to continuing and perpetuating a community that everybody has said through the various, comprehensive plans, et cetera, that we want to see. It won't happen without you. That's, I think, more than anything, the primary thing that I hope to try to, and it's not an agenda item, that's not something that's going to be talked about necessarily. It's going to be more about how we operate and the things that we ask of you as citizens to get involved, especially, Phil mentioned, I think it was either in your notes on Ryan's deal or Brooke, that you've got more time now, that you've gone to kind of the second half of life there. There's a lot of opportunities for everybody here to get involved, and the more you're involved, the more you will know, and you will not feel like you're getting some stuff thrust upon you. So that's really all I have to offer or close with.
Thank you. Alec?
So first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and the mayor and the city staff for their efforts to organize this forum, giving me and the other candidates here the opportunity to speak. I'd also like to thank the moderator, Suzanne, for doing a great job with the questions and keeping us on track.
My
and Amber
pleasure.
too with the alarm, the hand signals.
Yes.
I'd be honored to serve on Rollingwood City Council. As I stated and showed previously, I think my skills can help this city going forward. I'm committed to dedicating the time and the energy necessary to help ensure that our city is heading in the right direction and stays on track. I know this is a volunteer job and that we won't get paid for it, but I'm willing to put in the time and energy for it, whatever it takes. So you've seen, firsthand my ability to engage the community on an important topic, to keep the community informed, and to encourage the community to get involved and participate in council meetings. We need to continue seeking this level of community involvement going forward. I will apply engineering-based approach to helping find cost-effective ways to solve our infrastructure issues, and will use my finance background to help us understand options on how we might pay for potential projects should the community decide to pursue them. When it comes to expenditures, I'm in favor of letting voters decide which of these projects we pursue. With any of the other decisions that we make, I'll seek the community feedback before making those. And I recognize, finally, that this job is all about serving you, and I would be honored to have one of your votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Thanks. So thank you for being here. I'm going to use my last 2 minutes as a moment just to provide some information that follows up on one of the questions that was asked. So on the Zilker Park question, there's actually a community meeting tonight that was virtual, that was at 6 p.m. and at the same time as this meeting. And we have an item on the agenda tomorrow night to be able to discuss that presentation once we're able to review what was actually presented tonight. I hope that you will consider looking at it yourself and also participating in the council meeting tomorrow night. The transportation portion is what was focused on tonight. So my understanding is that they are throwing out a bunch of ideas and then letting the community tell them what they think might work. I would anticipate that we as a city will need to come up with a cohesive position that we're advocating for, because we're usually more effective when we have a larger voice like that. The other thing I was going to point to is over the last it's been like 5 years, the city has continued to budget for outside counsel for the MOPAC project. RCDC also funds part of that potential budget. We've never used all of it. It's just there in case we need it. Our current outside counsel that helps with that is Bickerstaff. So that's just some information. The other thing I would point to that potentially is a great example of the work that if you were here when Tom was mayor the second time, we put together a letter in response to the MOPAC project proposal at that time, and then Tom had 20 people go out and go street to street, door to door, having most of our community sign that petition, so that we had a petition that went in with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of signatures. So I look forward to the continued work that we can do that way.
Thank you. Emily?
I'll be brief. I think I want everyone to here and at home, thank you so much, but also think about what you want on your city council. And what does that look like? And we were asked tough questions tonight, and how did we address them? And did we fulfill, the questions that you had? And if not, please come up and talk to any of us. I know we'd be open to that. But I think really be thoughtful about what you want to see for the future of the city. I think that's really important. I would love to sit up here and represent you all. But also I think the biggest piece here is, we've all talked about it, is this connectivity that needs to happen. There's been a lot of divisiveness, not just in Rollingwood, but in our world. And so how do we come together? Got a lot of ideas, probably some 5Ks in there. But I do think that I would be honored to serve. I would welcome the opportunity and look forward to the future. But think about who you want to see up here. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
can have my time.
Brooke? Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I've spent a lifetime in the legal profession, and that could be seen as very boring, but what I am at heart is a problem solver. I've worked with clients to solve problems. I'm not a litigator. I bring people together. I listen. I will listen to you. I will dedicate my service on the council to fixing these longstanding problems that we need to have fixed, and to do it in a very open and transparent way. I am committed to that. I have some experience in doing it, and if you vote for me, that's what I offer to this community. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And thank you all for attending. I hope you'll go vote. Early voting has already started. And I'm sure you feel better about the process knowing that you have these 6 great candidates. Thanks for allowing me to help.
And thank you, Sandra. Thank you. Suzanne, I'm sorry, Suzanne.
Well, like I said, I always, I know too much, so.
Yes, yes.
Oh, you know too much about what we're in
Yes.
for. I've been watching this now.
I worried about the total numbers. I worried a little about the total numbers. Great job.
Oh, Chris, thank you. Thanks. Great job. Yeah, thanks. I waved. You were very focused.
Okay.
You were very
Next
focused.
time, roll down the window.
Oh.
Yell at me.
Oh, I was afraid.
No. I was really
Yes, that's exactly it. You had your workout pants.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you made
That brought back all those times at I looked at this first and I thought it was a sheriff's. Then I realized what it is.
You have a face. Oh, well, thank you, guys. I know, I saw that. Well, I'm very appreciative.
What's today? It's Tuesday? Okay, great, thanks. How's your team?